Okay, so my chopper had a transmission oil leak and I decided to replace all the seals. So this is the assembly of how it goes back together. Since taking it apart's not of much interest, it's the going back together. There's a few little tricks that are important. So the first thing I do is, after it's apart, is I make sure to clean everything and get the threads and all the oil off of everything, so that when you put it back together, it goes back together nice and clean. There's also a couple tools that you need to have to do this job right, and they're made by Jim's. The one tool is, they're both to install the seal, and you'll see me use them, but this tool goes over the shaft, and then this tool puts the seal in and sets it to the right depth. The seals that get installed are the main shaft seal, and the spacer goes in there, and then the back of the spacer has a bevel, and that's where this quad seal sits. That all goes on here. This seal goes internal to here, and then the last seal is on in this nut, and that's for the clutch throw-out bearing shaft to disengage the clutch, the push rod. One thing I always do with these seals is put a bead of RTV around them, the black RTV, to give them a little extra help in sealing. This big seal you can generally push in with your fingers, so it's pretty much a non-issue. And then before I install anything, I make sure that I put some oil on the lip of the seal, so that when you're putting it together, it doesn't damage it. So I just get a little black RTV. And then I just put a little skim around it. Like I said, it's a very little skim around the whole edge of it there. And then when I'm done doing that, I just give it a little wipe on the outside, make sure any excess is taken off. And that also helps ensure that it's sealed in. The next thing I do, like I said, is just get a little, this happens to just be motor oil. You can also use transmission oil, of course. And then this quad seal gets installed just like this. Just want to make sure it's not twisted, and it pushes on real light like that. Before I put the spacer in, I just give it a quick polish with some green 3M Scotch-Brite. So through the magic of editing, cleaned up very nice. Now I just rub some regular old motor oil on both sides of it. Make sure you get that bevel real good. Just get it covered. And now it should slip in real nice and easy. It's about as easy as you could get. Now with the next seal, I just get a little bit of RTV. And again, I just go put a very light skim around the outside. And then that's it. Just a light skim. Now I place the tool over the end. After I place the tool over the end, I coat the tool with a nice light coat of motor oil again. And then I slip the seal on it. And this tool saves the splines from cutting it. And again, you want to make sure the shaft has some oil on it so that it slides over the shaft without damaging it. Now you use the tool to push it on. Now I bang it up with a hammer till it's up flush. Now the tool with the lip was flat up against it, and that seats that seal at the proper depth. Again, it's at the proper depth, and the other piece comes off with it. Now you put the main drive sprocket on. Next, you put the main drive nut on. But before I put this on, I want to talk about the tool. This is a tool I made. This nut is 1 7/8". So I got an 1 7/8 socket, a piece of standard pipe, schedule 40 pipe, I believe it's 1 inch, 1.25 inches. And then I got a standard socket, and this socket happens to be 1.25 inch socket, and welded it all together. Now, one thing you have to do in order for this to work is you have to face this socket so it's flat. Sockets have a bevel on them, so they're real easy to get onto the nut when you're looking for speed. But because this nut's so thin, that beveled area wouldn't grab the nut enough. So you have to face it so that it grabs the full nut. Before I put the nut on, I want to take the old Loctite out of the threads so they're clean. So I just have a little small file like this. I hit it with some brake clean, and then just clean those threads. So now you can see they're nice and clean. I had already cleaned these threads with the file. Now this is left-handed, this nut. So before I put it on, I use a little blue Loctite. This also takes a lock bolt that locks this in, but I like to be double sure it's not going to come loose. So I put it on, and like I said, it's left-handed. So the book calls for this to be torqued to 50 foot-pounds, and then 30 to 45 degrees. And I believe it's to line one of these locks up for it. So at this point, you could use an impact if you weren't worried about the bearing, or just and there we go. As you can see, my lock is right here. Okay, now I put the Allen head in that locks that nut in place, and again I use some blue Loctite on it. I've already cleaned the threads up. You don't need to tighten this overly tight since it's such a small Allen head cap screw, and it's Loctited and the nut's Loctited. It will not come apart. The next thing is to put the hub on. Put the belt on. This is a BDL setup. And then to put the front pulley on to the engine. Now, my front pulley didn't sit right, so I made this aluminum plate, and this spaces it out properly. But before you can put that on, you have to have the belt on first. Now you can see my belt has some wear on the outside right there, and that's where the kickstand rubs on it at times. Again, with the engine sprocket shaft, blue Loctite, then the washer and the nut. This is a right-handed thread. Next is the clutch push rod, and I make sure to put some oil on it so that the seal is not going on dry. The next thing I do before I put the nut on to hold the clutch basket is I put the seal in with a little black RTV on it, which I already done, and I take and clean up the threads, which I had already done. Again, this is a left-handed thread, and I put some Loctite on it. Okay, next thing, it gets torqued to 70 to 80 foot-pounds. I'm holding my foot on the brake. This is left-handed, so I have it set to 75. This nut is 1.25 inches. The one on the motor on this bike in particular is 1 5/16 inches. Next, before I torque the engine sprocket to 45 foot-pounds, I'm going to put the clutch together. Then I can use the rear brake to hold the engine. So this starts out with a thick steel first, and then it'll go clutch steel all the way to the end. The last one is a steel because it goes up against the aluminum pressure plate. Now to put the pressure plate on, use these clutch springs. And I don't run them all, but I do Loctite them. That one doesn't have Loctite. I just need to hold it. And now I just put a little Loctite on them. Okay, through the magic of editing, they're all installed with blue Loctite and torqued to 10 foot-pounds. And now I will torque the front engine nut to 45 foot-pounds. So as you can see, this is finished. I didn't unadjust the clutch, so I shouldn't have to adjust it. And it's a foot clutch along with jockey shift. And while we're at it, this is jockey shift suicide clutch. It's not suicide shift. I've heard that so many times. There's nothing suicide about shifting like this. It's jockey. Suicide is if you're stopped at a traffic light and you let off that in gear. That's suicide because you're going out in traffic. So let's get it straight.